Her 12th birthday that summer was barely celebrated, with a dismal cake and some iTunes cards from the Save Easy grocery. Her upcoming 13th looked like it was following a similar trajectory, swallowed up by the sale of the family home. She was starting to wonder if anyone had remembered, but she didn't want to ask. It made her feel greedy, and she didn't want to look greedy. That made her feel guilty. But what if they hadn't? She felt angry, sad, greedy, guilty, and confused. It had been a somber drive back east this year, and when they arrived, no one met them as they drove up the lane. The house was strangely silent, and yet it was almost like Alice could see him sometimes from the corner of her eye. Or if she turned quickly, she might catch him there behind her. But he wasn't. She had the year to prepare for what was happening now, but it still felt so wrong. Everything was slipping away, and nothing she could do would stop it. Alice knew every corner of the house, every trunk and dress-up. It seemed impossible there could be anything that she hadn't seen before. But now she wished she had asked more questions. Who had crocheted the baby's baptismal dress? Who had worn that bracelet or done their hair with that silver comb in a leather case? Because now the person who knew was gone. Grandy would have known whose comb that was, or school book, or rocking horse. He would have held her in rapt attention while he recounted tales of all the relatives who had gone before, like something out of a storybook. He would go through the old photo albums with him pointing out great-grandparents in long white dresses sitting on the front porch, or riding in buggies with distinguished bearded men. What would happen after this summer? She couldn't believe she would never lie here and see the grass and the sky from her window, or slide down the banister, or play dress-up. Although at nearly 13 she was getting a bit old for that. But what gave her the happiest feeling inside was that someday, if they ever did come back, she would have to knock on the door to ask a stranger if she could come in. These depressing thoughts were interrupted by a car door slamming. She looked out to see Blanche had returned and was unloading more boxes to pack things up in. Alice called out the window, "Hey, Blanche!" Blanche looked up and waved. "Alice, are you just getting out of bed? How are you this fine morning?" "No, I've been up a couple of hours." Alice ran down the little back stairs and out to greet her, and Blanche gave her a big hug. "Morning, kiddo. Are you all set?" Alice interrupted. "Don't say it, please. Everyone is saying it, and I don't want to hear it any more." "Then I won't. Give me a hand with these." While Alice gathered up a few boxes, Blanche was leaning against the car, observing her intently. "I've been getting vibes lately." Alice gave her a doubtful look. Blanche was always getting vibes that no one else ever did. "Have you felt anything? Noticed anything? As if you're being directed? I feel that Grandy is very close to you lately. I feel like he's trying to tell you something." Alice shrugged and looked away. Much as she wanted to believe, Alice never felt vibes, or heard things, or experienced anything like the world that Blanche inhabited. Still, it would be wonderful if she could. She missed her grandfather terribly. "Not yet," was all she answered. Blanche nodded sympathetically, but mentally kicked herself. By now she should have learned to keep anything about ghosts quiet. She had hoped to cheer Alice up a bit with telling her that Grandy was nearby, but it seemed to have had the opposite effect. She changed the subject. "I hope there's coffee on. I could do with a pick-me-up after that St. John run," she said, and opened the door for Alice, whose arms were full of boxes. "What did you need to go to St. John for?" "Oh, just some things I had to do. I got some packing supplies while I was there." "Everyone's just getting up. Percy put some coffee on earlier. I imagine Mom's got a fresh pot going." Alice followed Blanche to the kitchen. The aroma of toast and coffee greeted them. They picked their way, trying not to trip over the various piles of items on the floor. "Ah, caffeine. Gotta love a cup of fresh-made Java," Blanche said in a sprightly tone as she helped herself to the coffee. "Morning, Josie. Is everything all ship-shape and tiggity-boo?" All set to rock and roll?" Alice's mother nodded with a slight frown, her default expression when it came to dealing with her younger sister. Josie had the spiral notebook in front of her, with names at the top and lists below. "Good morning, Blanche. Nice you finally made it. There's lots to do." Josie saw herself as the responsible one, and nobody seemed to be taking what needed to be done seriously. At this point, she was feeling quite put upon, and Blanche, rolling in with her cavalier, freewheeling attitude, was exasperating. Although, truth told, everything right now was a source of exasperation for Josie. She was exhausted. Percy looked up from his iPhone and saluted her. "Good morning, Auntie Blanche. Have you received your list of assigned tasks for the day?" Blanche laughed and shook her head. "No, I'm just going to wing it. Pick a spot and just start putting stuff in boxes." Josie's frown deepened. A straight vertical line between her eyebrows wrote "Blanche" at the top of one of the lists and underlined it. "I'll assume that everyone has marked their items of importance that they are taking with them," said Josie, and handed Blanche her duties for the day. Blanche did a slight elbow and smiled graciously as she accepted the list. "Indeed," said Percy. "I have obtained the print of Napoleon's Retreat, as well as the portable gramophone and numerous first editions." "Well, I'm looking for jewelry," said Blanche. "There's some spectacular amethyst drop earrings, and somewhere I saw a cameo brooch that was just beautiful." Alice's father Edmund looked up from his paper. "That's a great drawing of a duck, Alice." At this point, Alice picked up a couple of boxes and headed into the parlor. She just didn't feel much like talking this morning. It was all getting a bit much. Percy and Blanche seemed to have launched into their wish list of the spoils. Mom was into busy mode. "A duck? Seriously, Dad?" She went off to sort through the ornaments and knickknacks to see if there were any more cute ones like the mouse. She drifted into the parlor and, shutting the door behind her for some privacy, and sat down on the dark red brocade sofa and looked over all the curios, all with little price stickers on them. Which one to choose? She wanted all of them. They were like pieces of a puzzle that made up the whole of her memories of this place. How could she just take one? The picture was incomplete. Alice looked over at the marble fireplace and recalled how sometimes, if Blanche was busy with work, and she and Grandy were alone in the evenings, he'd start a fire. She'd always tried to get close to the warmth, as the Gallagher house, with its large rooms and high ceilings, was cold and damp when the fog rolled in, even on summer evenings. He'd make some macaroni and cheese, and they'd sit together chatting about anything and everything. The brass fire fender of cherubs danced in the light of the glowing coals that lit the fireplace and warmed the room. Her grandfather would light his pipe, which he smoked when Josie wasn't around. Alice always liked the smell of the smoke from the fires in his pipe. It was warm and comforting. She looked around at the gilt-framed paintings and mirrors that still remained on the walls, sighed, and was about to bring the ornaments into the dining room when she heard someone call her name. She turned to see who it was and noticed that the door to the parlor was open. Puzzled, she went into the kitchen to see who had called. There was lots of chatter in the kitchen, but it didn't seem that anyone had been looking for her. Her mother was frenetically making breakfast, writing more lists and telling everyone what their jobs were. Her father, who rarely said anything, sat in the corner by the window reading the paper, while Morris, the ancient lab, snoozed at his feet. Percy on his second bowl of cereal while he messaged friends on his phone. Blanche was trying to get her sister to calm down without actually saying the words. To even hint that Josie might be the least bit frazzled would invite a tirade of what needed to be done. Alice hung back in the doorway, about to ask who called, but it didn't look like she was needed, and was about to go back to the privacy of the parlor when Josie looked up and spotted her. "Where's Delia?" Too late. Discovered. "She should be up. Alice, go tell your sister to get the lead out. I need all hands on deck." Terrific. She had been designated the odious task of motivating her older sister to get the lead out. As if. Alice resentfully trudged up the kitchen stairs to her sister's room. Through the slightly open door, Alice could see the Queen sprawled on her bed, scanning beauty tips on her laptop. Delia cast a scornful eye towards the door. It radiated venom. "What?" she snapped. "Mum says..." Delia kicked the door shut with a bang. Delia had embraced adolescence with a vengeance. Angry outbursts, taciturn silence, and selfishness that made her thoroughly miserable to be around. Alice went back down the stairs and sang out to the kitchen, "She's on her way." About 15 minutes later, she heard her mother storming up the stairs, a muffled argument and banging of doors. The Queen descended about an hour later in full makeup and ripped jeans. "Where's the cereal?" "I think Percy finished it off," sighed Josie, who was starting to clean up the kitchen. "But there's some scrambled eggs and..." "I don't want scrambled eggs. I wanted some cereal. No one ever thinks about me." Delia burst into tears. There were more doors banging, then the sound of a car starting. Alice and Blanche watched as Delia screeched out of the laneway, presumably in search of cereal. Josie stuck her head through the kitchen door. "You see what she's like? You have no idea, Blanche. She's impossible. All that makeup and that outfit she's wearing, I swear I don't know what I'll do if this keeps up much longer." "Sucks to be Delia," shrugged Blanche and continued sorting stuff from the pantry. "Perhaps you can keep her in a locked room and feed her nothing but scrambled eggs," Alice giggled. "It's not funny, you two. You don't have to deal with her all the time." Josie stomped back into the kitchen to furiously wash the dishes. Blanche exchanged a rolling of the eyes with Alice. "Want to help me with this?" asked Blanche. I think I'm going to the study and check out the books for a bit before Mom gets at them. There were a few I think I'd like. I'll give you a hand in a few minutes." Alice disappeared into the study. Compared to the grandeur of the other rooms, the study was small and cozy. Green velvet curtains were tied back with thick gold rope, hung with heavy gold tassels. The fireplace was ornately carved, and the wallpaper was a dark floral pattern common at the turn of the century. It was here that her grandparents would spend their evenings reading or watching Masterpiece Theatre, as Maine PBS came in clear as a bell to New Brunswick. Alice had few memories of her grandmother, who passed away when Alice was still very young. Her grandfather had chosen to stay on in the big house, despite Josie's insistence that he should move in with them. "He's getting too old to be all alone in there. What if something were to happen? He could fall down the stairs. How would we know?" Josie worried about her father, but he would wave off her concerns. "I'm comfortable where I am. I don't want to move to Ottawa," was always his answer. "I wouldn't know what to do with myself living with you. You'd always be fussing over me." This was true, because Josie fussed over everything. Alice stood looking around at the old prints and engravings, the Toby mugs that lined the mantel of the fireplace, and the ceiling-to-floor bookcases that enclosed most of the room. She gazed longingly at the glass box with the stuffed animals. So cool. What did her mother have against it, she wondered. She opened the bookcase door and traced her hand along the various titles. To Kill a Mockingbird, The Yearling, Rudyard Kipling's Just So stories. Some had leather bindings and gold-edged pages. Old books. Alice hoped someone would take them. Everyone downloaded their books now. Her eye caught sight of an old photo album that she and Grandy used to go through while he told stories about the people in them, relations who went back several generations. There were the twins that Adelia and Alice were named after, as well as Aunt Josephine. Alice wondered why they'd chosen the same names. Weren't there any others available, like Vanessa or Claire? Maybe they thought it ecologically important to recycle names. She looked through the photos for a while, then laid it on the small table by the old chair Grandy used to sit in. She went back to the bookcase and checked the drawers below the shelves. There were some old games, snakes and ladders, pick-up sticks, miscellaneous papers, and a little autograph book, leather with an embossed floral design on the cover. She flipped through it. people's names signed with a flourish, phrases of endearment with quaint sayings. When this you see, remember me, though many a mile we distant be. There were some old letters, a thank you note with a violet in the corner. Dearest Josephine, the flowers were so beautiful, love, Miriam. And a small envelope with never forgotten, forever loved, written in an old-fashioned hand. It was unsealed. Inside was a small key with a gold fob, engraved with the letter A, for Adelia or Alice. Some ancient relative? "Hey, Alice, come give me a hand with this stuff and keep me company." It was Blanche. "Sure, I'll be right there." Alice stuffed the envelope in her pocket, closed the bookcase, and picked up the photo album and autograph book. As she was about to leave the study, Alice could have sworn the smell of pipe tobacco wafted through the room. "Find anything?" asked Blanche, who was seated on the floor surrounded by Royal Dalton cups and saucers. Alice sat down beside her to show her what she had. "Oh my gosh, I remember this. Haven't gone through it in years." Blanche turned the photo album pages thoughtfully. "Oh, look, I think that's Grammy Blanche, your granddad's grandmother." She pointed to a photo of a portly woman with a small dog and an enormous hat of feathers and flowers. Her black dress was long, buttoned up to the neck with sleeves to the wrists. "Wow, look at those outfits. Bet they'd be hot in summer." Alice nodded. Blanche turned the pages. There were photos of her grandfather as a little boy with his sisters, Josephine, Adelia, and Alice, playing croquet on the lawns with their parents, Sophia and Percy. Photos of Grandy as a young man, sitting in a horse-drawn wagon with friends, standing in front of the house all dressed up in a white suit with a Panama hat, waving at someone. He was so young. Alice hardly recognized him as the old man she knew, but his smile had never changed, always warm, always kind. Blanche closed the album and passed it back to Alice. "That's our family," she said. "That's where we come from." They both sat thoughtfully for a moment until Blanche broke the silence. "Here, I'll wrap and you can put them in the boxes." For the next little while, Blanche and Alice passed the time together wrapping up dishes and making fun of Delia. They could hear Josie upstairs giving instructions to Percy and her husband, and the thump of footsteps as boxes and furniture were moved. As yet, Delia had not returned. Alice was mostly silent while they packed, and Blanche couldn't help but notice she was in a funk, and had been for days. It had been a difficult year for everyone, but Alice had taken her grandfather's death especially hard. Now, with the house being sold and sorting through its contents to ready them for auction, Alice had been markedly glum and subdued. It was time to pull her out of the nosedive before she really dug in. Blanche looked at her watch. It was about 2 p.m. Low tide would be around 4. "I'm getting kind of tired of this," announced Blanche. She stood up, stretching. "Me too. We've been packing for hours. It's getting boring." Alice got up and leaned against the wall, her arms folded, her face morose. "How's about you and me go to New River Beach? Tide'll be flat out by 4, and this time of year the water won't turn you blue. Go get your suit. We'll leave in 5. Alice shrugged, but her face had brightened. She ran upstairs to her bedroom with the photo album and little autograph book and put them on the nightstand. She got her bathing suit from the suitcase and tucked the little envelope with the key in a side pocket. She took Grandy Tilly's hat for the sun and ran down the back stairs to where Blanche was waiting in her beat-up Subaru. She wanted to stay in her mood, but going to New River might make that difficult. New River was breathtakingly beautiful. A panorama of sea and sky with 2 miles of shoreline that, when the Bay of Fundy tides retreated, the flat sand beaches seemed to stretch out towards the ocean forever. A contest was held every summer where enthusiastic participants molded fantastical creatures from the damp sand. For a few brief hours appeared dragons, lobsters, octopuses, and elaborate castles, only to be leveled by the incoming tide and disappear without a trace. It wouldn't be a visit home without at least one trip to New River. It was mandatory. "Buckle up, kiddo." Blanche glanced over to check the mood on Alice's face. She hoped New River would change the gloom that Alice was nursing. The half-hour ride went along the coastline, and Alice rolled her window down to catch the breeze and the salt smell of the ocean. She looked out the window at the seaweed-covered rocks. They reminded her of enormous shaggy animals all lying down, mammoths or muskox. She imagined what it would be like if they were to rise, their long seaweed hair swinging in ropes as they strolled the beaches. Alice leaned her chin in her hand as she stared at the passing scenery. On days like today, the ocean was a vivid blue, sparkling and dancing under the summer sun. But on stormy days, the rolling gray waves were cold and forbidding as they crashed on the shores. The view was always changing with the weather and the Fundy tides. Her heart was feeling heavy. What if she decided to voice her fears? "What if we never come back here?" Alice asked forlornly. Blanche looked at her with concern. "Is that what's eating you?" "Oh, kiddo, have I got a surprise for you. All I can say is we are most definitely coming back, just like we always do. That won't change." To Alice, that sounded a lot like, "Sure we will," and then they wouldn't. "But we won't be in the house." "No, but I'm sure you could visit. The family who's moving in are super nice. They have kids. I think the oldest is 10. "But it won't be the same." The gloom was returning. Blanche was sympathetic, but she wasn't going to indulge Alice's frame of mind. "No, it won't, Alice. Things change. They change all the time, and we have to roll with that. It doesn't mean that the change is bad. It's just different. But here's the thing. You can't sit around with a long face thinking that's going to help. It doesn't." Silence. Blanche persevered. "You can go and visit with the new owners. Introduce yourself and tell them all the stories that Grandy used to tell you. I'm sure they'd like to hear them. All that history about our relatives and what happened. They'd love it. I know they would. They're really nice people, Alice. They'll be good for the house. It needs repair and paint. It needs a family just like them, too, to liven it up, to love it like we did." "I guess." Blanche could see that Alice was on the verge of tears as they pulled into the parking lot. Thank God they had arrived.